Hi, everyone. This is Danielle White, Vice President of Global Customer Engagement for Collaborative Solutions, and I welcome you to our second Ask the Expert series, today's focus being on core HR and recruiting. Let me get started by introducing you to our experts that we have supporting us today. First, we have Colleen Garrett, based in Arlington, Virginia. She has 6 years of Workday experience at Collaborative and is a Workday product lead and a Workday delivery assurance reviewer. Anita Sales has been in consulting in the Workday ecosystem for over 7 years, working across multiple industries, primarily focused on core HR and compensation. Prior to that, she was in higher education across HRIS and HR roles for over 11 years. Erin Finch is a senior manager in our organizational change and training practice. She's been with Collaborative for 5 years and is based in Gainesville, Florida. And she's worked on several Workday recruiting implementations, including those for American Family, HomeSite, The General, Mass Mutual, and University of Southern California in Booz Allen Hamilton. And returning us from last week is Blake Williams, who has 14 years of IT consulting experience and has been in the Workday ecosystem since 2011. He holds multiple Workday certifications and has vast experience in large implementations and global transformations. Angela Ward is our strategy practice leader in advisory services and has over 15 years of experience concentrating in various areas of HR, as well as 8 years of Workday consulting. And then just in case any of our topics today trend back towards our time tracking, absence, and payroll questions, we're also glad to have Karen Craig back with us, who has almost 30 years of absence management experience encompassing internal HR administration, HR consulting, and Workday client support. She's the manager of our CBS absence and time tracking team. And finally, Kevin Carlson is a senior manager on the CBS payroll team and has been with Collaborative for 4.5 years. Just a reminder, same as last week, the information discussed in this webinar is based on our best practices at Collaborative Solutions and based on the information we have to date regarding rules and regulations, as it is a very fluid environment. As the nature of the pandemic is changing, almost daily, any additional rules and regulations being released on a regular manner, please consult your local, state, and federal regulatory resources to ensure compliance. I'm going to give a little bit of information about Collaborative Solutions in case some of you who have joined us aren't familiar with us. And then I'll talk a little bit about some things that we're hearing in our clients and across the ecosystem about questions people are having. And then we'll open this up for Q&A. So for those who aren't familiar with us, Collaborative Solutions is a finance, HR, and student transformation consultancy. We're the longest legacy Workday partner and have served over 800 Workday customers. Of the things that we're very proud of, obviously our 98% customer satisfaction rate is top of mind. And then obviously by sharing with you on our Ask the Experts, we are very proud of our Workday expertise and have over 100 product leads. We do have a global view and have deployed in over 125 countries. Additionally, we have all-encompassing advisory services across strategy as well as change management, and really consider ourselves to be the alternative to large SIs by giving you a boutique experience. And then finally, as everyone is thinking about their current employer brand and how we have employee engagement throughout all of these challenges, we are very proud of all of the awards that we have won over the several years, declaring us one of the best places to work. So today I'm going to talk a little bit again about what we're hearing in the areas of core HR and recruiting, as well as service delivery, governance, and adoption considerations. And then we'll open it up again for audience Q&A. And then just a reminder on the Q&A, I think it worked really well last week if you guys will put your questions in the question box in the webinar, and then I can unmute you and we can make sure that we have a robust conversation. So what are we hearing today? We're hearing a lot, obviously, about remote workers. Do you track remote workers in Workday? And are you using that information to support any decision making? How are you tracking them? What information are you tracking on them? What about essential employees? How are you defining essential employees? Are you using the critical jobs in Workday, or are you using lost impact, or some combination of the two? Do you need to report on these workers or use this information to inform payroll? And are you creating essential worker cards for any travel restricted areas? We see a lot of changes in the recruiting world as a result of what's going on today. Some organizations are experiencing a downturn in their recruiting efforts, while others are obviously identifying an uptick. But are your roles temporary? Do they need to be frozen? Do they need to be put on hold? And how do we make sure that we're identifying ways to track all this information to not disrupt your recruiting metrics? Shadow operations. I've heard a lot of comments about all these changes happening fast and that we've kind of let managers do things outside of the system to keep up the pace. If you've had that challenge, what do you need to know to get all that information into Workday? And obviously, as companies are looking at responding corporately to this response and how do they keep, financial obligations going, there's a lot of changes in compensation. Are you applying compensation decreases to employees to offset that financial impact? Do those decreases affect certain populations, like maybe only your leadership or the entire population? Are you deferring bonuses or canceling them? And then we have industries who are needing to increase compensation to offset the fact that they are asking for employees to work more or in more hazardous situations. From a service delivery model perspective, again, we're hearing that managers may be filling multiple roles to keep your organization operating. Do your processes need to be modified to reflect that? Is HR set up to provide the coaching, guidance, and oversight that is needed during this time? From a data governance, similar to last week, does your current data governance strategy allow for the remote access to your employees or broad access to data, or is it restrictive? What kind of audits need to be put in place to support the world that we're in today? And then employees need to really be able to have user adoption to support everything that they're doing remotely. Are we communicating on that? Are we getting them where they need to be? Are they feeling change saturation and you have questions about adoption? So these are just some of the things that we're hearing out there, but obviously more importantly is not to listen to what I have to say, but to hear what you have to say and make sure that we can answer your questions. So if anybody has a question, please let me know. Just checking to see if anybody's raising their hand instead of writing the question out. And the questions don't need to be limited to the things that we've been hearing about. If you have questions anywhere along the course of core HR or recruiting, or again, if there's any that need to be asked again and follow up to time tracking or absence or payroll or how all of these things relate to each other, please reach out and let us know what questions you have. So while we wait for some questions to come in, I'm actually going to reach out to Karen. Karen, I know that you've been serving our production customers over the last several weeks that we've been working remotely. And I know that you had a lot to say last week on time tracking and absence. Have you heard anything new or encountered any additional challenges over the last week since we last spoke?
No, Danielle, not anything major. I think that since we had our original Ask the Expert session, we have received some additional guidance from the Department of Labor on the use of the new Family First Coronavirus Act. So for those clients who are affected by that new legislation, if you have 500 employees or less, or you choose to abide by that legislation, there has been some additional guidance that allows various uses of paid time off and use of the time intermittently. So that's caused a little bit of kind of backtracking and adjustments for some clients. And it really is kind of a moving target because advice and guidance from the Department of Labor is coming out kind of every other day. So really, we're just kind of reacting at this point. We're seeing a lot of COVID-19 sick time off plans, furloughs, doing that as a leave of absence and based on what you want to do with your benefits and pay during that time. So we're seeing a lot of variations across the board just based on what clients want to do behind the scenes. So I'm happy to also take any absence or time tracking related questions on this webinar if anybody has any.
Thanks, Karen. Colleen, I did want to reach out to you. I know you and I had an opportunity to talk earlier about some of the impacts to recruiting. And as I mentioned, I've heard a lot about how we're going to be able to report on recruiting in the future. And you were telling me about some functionality in Workday to help us make sure that we're tracking things properly, and then some other options for additional reporting needs are available in the future. Can you talk a little bit about what our options are?
Sure. Hi, Danielle. Hi, everybody. So from a reporting perspective, in regards to recruiting, luckily Workday already has us covered from a reporting perspective. We have our delivered time to fill report, and every client has 4 options for how they want to configure their average time to fill calculation. And you might not know this, but it already subtracts the number of days frozen from your average time to fill. So as long as you're freezing your job recs, if you do have to put a hiring freeze in place, that'll be subtracted from your average time to fill. Putting a new reason in place for COVID-related freezes might also be a way to help you differentiate normal pause in hiring activity versus things that are specific to COVID. So that's one way that you could get creative with subtracting and making sure that this doesn't inflate your time to fill counts. As far as reporting, another thing that's important to keep in mind is if you subscribe to OFCCP emails like I do, they've sent a reminder out that they're still very much active. So it's not a time to relax anything in regards to collecting the required information on your candidate pipeline if you are hiring, especially if you're ramping up hiring to be extra fast. One of the new features that Workday came out with this spring was the Introduce Yourself feature, which acts as their answer to a CRM. So even if you're in a hiring freeze or if you need to take a pause on putting your hireable recs out there, it's no time to let your pipeline go slack. You can still cater to those people who have time on their hands right now and are looking around at jobs and allow them to drop off a resume, because the new feature that Workday put out is just that. It's a resume drop. It's a chance for them to get their foot in the door with you guys, even if there's not a rec for them to apply to at the moment. And they can still subscribe to your external job alerts. So making sure that you have your internal and your external job alerts feature on would be a good thing to do now if you have the time. Those are a few thoughts.
Excellent. And I think we do have one question. One of the questions out there, Colleen, is we're looking for expedited hiring methods. They're based in the healthcare industry. One component limiting their efforts is getting the date of birth necessary for AD integration. This is currently being collected at the candidate level with candidate home or onboarding business process, the personal information onboarding task. Do you know of any ways for HR to input this on behalf of new team members' behalf? And that could be you or Anita. I think it crosses a little bit over the recruiting as well as the core HR.
Yeah, so collecting date of birth can be done on the candidate during the job application business process. And it sounds like that might be what you have set up today. You have it as a sub-process of the job app. So it's just a security mechanism that's controlling who can enter that. Right now, you might not have your recruiting admin nor your recruiters enabled to enter the date of birth on behalf of the candidate. It's just a security change. The domain is probably pre-hire date of birth, I think is the name of it. If you happen to be a security admin, you could do security for securable item and then type in candidate date of birth. So you can definitely enable a system user like a recruiter or an admin to enter that on behalf of the candidate. And that'll flow through to the pre-hire record and populate on the worker so that it's pre-populated on the worker record.
And Shelley, I'm going to take you off of mute. I just want to make sure that that answered your question.
It did. Thank you so much. We are not able to tackle that, so I'll work with our security team to see if we can do that. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, as we wait for more questions to come in, I'm going to actually reach out to Anita now. Anita, what are you hearing or thinking about in terms of core HR configuration and the impact from COVID?
I think some of the items that we see coming into play are questions around tracking essential employees and remote workers as well, shifting business operations to not only make sure that workers are able to continue to work continuously externally, but also that where you do have situations where an individual may have to commute to a work location where they're confronted with a shelter-in-place order, and they have to be able to prove their essential service function if they are questioned for any reason. Trying to streamline processes for getting that information out quickly and enabling workers and managers in particular to manage those employees accurately. We're also seeing some questions around compensation changes as well and identifying positions that are eligible for telecommuting. I think initially a lot of people were looking at ways to identify eligible for telecommute more and more as the volume of people who are working remotely has increased. I think that's becoming a more difficult question to define as well. And then of course the impacts of pursuing furloughs, layoffs, or terminations, and where some of those areas overlap with, depending on what your line of business is, are you confronting considerations around FLSA for reduced hours, or the WARN Act if you're having to look at mass layoffs or plant closings as well?
Thanks, Anita.
Mm-hmm.
Not as many questions this week as there were last week. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Erin, can you share with us some of the things that you're hearing and seeing from a change management or adoption standpoint during this time?
Absolutely. Yeah, so from an end user readiness, change management perspective, it's less about the configuration implications, but hearing a lot about remote workers, people adjusting to that, change in their work environment, change in the way that meetings are conducted. For some organizations, it's a really big impact to culture and, just kind of their standard day-to-day. So we've really been recommending and getting creative with customers and talking to people about, don't slow down your communication. So obviously there's a lot of communicating happening around COVID-19 and some of those operational changes, but reminding people to still go into Workday, execute tasks, some of those same reminders that you would probably do around your initial deployment or go live, things like that. Just, sending out maybe a little bit of extra support and information that way. And then same thing from a training perspective, whether it's new functionality, role changes, if you've got people moving into different roles as a part of the current environment, making sure that the support is there and thinking creatively, perhaps where this might have been a classroom training or something done a little more in person, how can you, leverage remote tools and options to make sure that there are no gaps just because people are working remotely a lot more than they have been. So that's a big area, utilizing things like on-demand learning or webinars like what we're doing right now is really great. And then for folks where, there might be an increase in hiring and things like that, just making sure that you don't lose sight of some of those support resources and things that those new employees coming in who are being onboarded will need to have access to, so that you maintain, that integrity of your data and in terms of tasks and things that, people are putting good data into the system because they understand what they're supposed to be doing, even though they may have been onboarded quickly.
Excellent. Thank you, Erin. And we actually have a couple questions that have come in. So I'm going to start reading off the one from Nate, and then I'll unmute you. We are implementing a new leave type for furloughing employees. We want to tie this new leave reason to the time entry template eligibility, so these employees cannot enter time. Any suggestions or best practices regarding this direction? Karen, I think that's going to go to you.
I'm sorry, can you repeat? It cut out in the middle of the question.
Apologies. We're implementing a new leave type for furloughing employees, and we want to tie this new leave reason to the time entry template eligibility, so these employees cannot enter time. Any suggestions or best practices regarding that?
So you can do actually a time entry validation around the leave status to prevent people from entering time when they're on leave would probably be the easiest way. And if it becomes more difficult where we want to have it limited to certain users or just the single leave type, then we could look at a security group to accomplish that. Does that help?
Nate, I unmuted you. Did that help? Are there any further questions based on that?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. No, I don't think we have any further questions. Only we are creating a separate security group for them as well. So are you saying for the second portion there, can you just explain a little bit more how I would leverage that security group in that case?
So you would probably have to do an intersection security group that's going to be around your enter time BP and your BP security policies. That would exclude them from the enter time step at the initiation.
Okay. Okay.
Does
That makes sense because we kind of
Okay.
danced around it a little bit and figured out, okay, I can remove them from the time entry code eligibility, and then it shows us, you know, they don't have any options. But then what if an admin needs to make a change? So this sounds better to me because then it's not stopping our admins from making changes, but it controls who can initiate that punch in and punch out. I like that better. So thank
Right.
you.
Right.
Okay.
Excellent. We also have a question around for time to fill Workday delivered reports. We're attempting to create 2 time to fill reports, one report that captures metrics from when the rec was approved and another from when the rec is posted. Are we able to capture time to fill from when the rec was approved?
Yep. So this is Colleen. Happy to answer this one. I just put a community link in as the answer to that question, and I'm hoping that that's public so you can see that and reference that article for later. But that references the What's New post from Workday 30. So that gives you step-by-step instructions on how to take those 4 calculations, copy the standard time to fill report, and apply one of the different averages. And if you're wondering where the average time to fill options are set up, that's under the Edit Tenant Setup Recruiting page. Scroll most of the way to the bottom, and that's where you have a drop-down list where Workday gives you a few different options. So if you want to go from when the job rec was approved, there's an option for that. You can do when the request was entered or completed. So the request meaning the create job requisition business process. Okay. Oh, Danielle, I think you're still on mute.
Thank you. Worrying about unmuting other people. Did that answer your question? I've unmuted you if you have further questions based on that.
Yes, ma'am, it did. Thank you so much. I'm just looking for the link to the community. Oh, I see it. I see it. Okay. Thank you.
Perfect. The next question we have is, we're considering an early retirement program for a portion of our workforce. Part of that program is to pay out a percentage of their annual salary over a 3-month period and continue a portion of their benefits until a specified date. What would be the best way to handle that, the compensation piece of that? So Anita?
So I believe if I'm understanding correctly, you're looking to make the payouts after the individual has gone over into early retirement. If that's the case, you would still be able to track the payments. Some of this would depend on also whether or not you are retiring the workers directly in Workday, or if you're terminating them and then you're supporting their retirement benefits in another system. If you're terminating them in Workday, you can continue to do payments post-termination and configure that setup. You might actually want to capture that salary as a separate compensation payment, or you can continue to allow their salary to pay out at the default, at the standard amount post-termination. Now, if they're retiring and you want to continue to pay them, you should be able to configure the payments for that as well. There's kind of a dividing line there on whether or not you're actually keeping them terminated in the system with a retiree status, or if you are actually retiring them in the system and potentially bringing them back as active employees at some point in the future. And I think I may need to get a little bit of feedback on that to narrow that down for you.
Melissa, I'm trying to unmute you. I think it finally took.
Yes,
Did that help?
it did. I think it's one thing we're considering is actually keeping them active until, I guess, the end of that period. And I know that's a little unusual, but we're taking into consideration things with their benefits.
Yeah.
So if we kept them active, would it make sense to just change their compensation directly through a comp change?
You could, if you're going to keep them active for that period, so you're not quite ready to retire them yet, you're going to keep them active so that they continue to show eligible for benefits, for example, under their existing benefits. So you might wind up putting them on something like a paid leave of absence and continue to pay them through payroll that way.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
And this
Thank
is
you.
Karen. I'm just going to jump. That paid leave of absence piece would also allow you to control whether you want their time off accruals, any PTO or sick time to continue or to cease during that period of time.
Thanks, Karen. And I think the next question is actually for you. I will unmute Nate here because he has a clarifying question regarding the intersection security group.
Hello.
Hi, Nate.
Hi, sorry about that. Okay, so my question is, okay, so our initiating groups include employee as self, and we're keeping these employees active, so they're going to still be in the employee as self group. And I don't want to remove that from our initiating groups for the enter time
Okay.
BP. So how, is there another way or some kind of workaround I can use?
Off the top of my head, I mean, you could do, is this a large group of employees?
We're looking at potentially 50 plus. So yeah.
I'm thinking about possibly doing like a custom org might be the way to go, that you could pull them in to exclude them from the employee as self group for purposes of time tracking.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be one of your options, and I will think on it a little bit more, Nate, and follow up with you.
Okay, sounds good. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Karen and Nate. So I think while we, again, wait for some questions to come in, I'm going to reach out to Blake and see what he's been hearing and seeing regarding data governance and security as we're moving to this new remote environment.
Thanks, Danielle. So I think one of the things that touches on a lot, if not all of the items that we've touched so far, is really how we govern our data in the new world that we find ourselves in. You know, a lot of our customers have a highly restrictive environment to where they truly govern with a tight clasp on who can access what data and what they could do from where. And, you know, the world we find ourselves in now in almost a fully remote model almost always impacts that approach. So what we've seen our customers doing is going back and revisiting their governance policies to see if they had anything in place for a disaster recovery, some type of immediate remote policy. And if not, looking for ways that they can facilitate and enable their people to do the work that they need to do as if they were in the office, but at home and remote. And it goes anything from access policies and authentication policies to who can access and from where. It could come in from VPN access, you know, if they have to be on a device, if it has to be on a customer-owned device. I mean, there's a lot of ways from within Workday where you can open up the gates to do what they need to do in Workday, but still put some restrictions on there so we don't totally open up the floodgates. And so we've seen a lot of focus on how the data is being constrained and how and where they can access it externally. So are there any questions or thoughts? Do we have anyone that's going through some things similar to that has any questions on those approaches?
Thanks, Blake. That's great information for us to have. I think, again, while we wait for questions to come in, I'm going to actually reach out to Angela now and see what she's been hearing or working with customers on how they've maybe adjusted their service delivery model to meet these new needs. Angela?
Yeah, good morning. I think one of the things that we're seeing most commonly is how do you handle the change in priority and make sure that your different HR folks, IT, finance, payroll have what they need to make changes quickly and respond to not necessarily break fix anymore, but things that have to be handled like a break fix. So one of the things we're seeing more common is, if you have weekly meetings normally, we're moving to more of an agile meeting methodology where you're meeting every day in short, brief instances to make sure everybody who's remote is connected, understands the priority, knows what's coming in, and can quickly reprioritize and make sure that they're getting back to their customers. Another thing that we're getting a lot of questions around is how to, again, make sure that folks know how to submit requests or issues or changes quickly, again, from a remote capacity. So if you don't have a ticketing system, what are ways that you can really get to those folks quickly and easily, and how are we communicating with them so that they know who to call, where, if there's an email box or if there's some other kind of portal link that can be made available quickly, so that, again, we're not losing time in being able to assist them with their questions, and replacing that touch point that they're missing from being, on a site together, or being able to walk down the hall, or get to people in the way that they're used to.
Thanks, Angela. That makes sense. I think I do want to follow up with Kevin next, because again, we covered time tracking, absence, and payroll last week, and similar to following up with Karen to see if anything's come out in the last week that we want to take into consideration, I'll toss this over to Kevin.
Sure. Thanks, Danielle. Yeah, I mean, kind of similar to Karen on the time tracking absence piece, understanding the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. One of the new things that Workday recently released is in regards to the taxation for employer Social Security tax. So if you are impacted from the Family First Act, where you have 500 employees or less, there is a new pay component group that you can add to the applicable sick codes that you're paying that are tied to the appropriate leave reasons that are laid out within that act, and you can control the taxation for your employer Social Security tax. So I mean, that's the big thing, and just working closely with your time tracking absence teams to link the appropriate time calc tags or time offs in relations to that. So that's really a big update, Danielle.
Thanks, Kevin. And we do have a question, and I'm going to hopefully try and get through all of it. And I think some of it might be benefits related, some of it could be related to some of your core HR. So we will see what we can do to answer. And if we can't get to everything, we will definitely follow up. But we do have a question that says, we would like to be ready to reduce employee hours to what is normally below the threshold to qualify for benefits. However, we do not want this to adversely impact the employee's benefits. At this time, we have created new job change reasons of start reduced hours and return from reduced hours for tracking reporting purposes as well as benefit purposes. And we've built a rule and are in process of testing that rule that if the latest job change reason is start reduced hours, the employee remains eligible for benefits. Our concern with this scenario is if another job change is submitted, then it would impact this eligibility rule, thereby removing the employee from benefits eligibility. Are there other options that you could suggest as to how to manage benefits eligibility without lowering the number of scheduled hours? Because we don't want to open all employees below the threshold hours to become benefits eligible. We also do not want to remove the MSS functionality. So Anita, I'll let you take a stab at what we can. And like I said, if we can't get through all of it, because there's a lot of, I think, specific benefits stuff, we can definitely follow up.
Yeah, and that's a tough question to answer too. There are some deciding factors based on how you have your current setup arranged as well, but there are ways that you can reduce hours without reducing FTE if you and I'm really, this is not an easy question to answer. It is a tough setup configuration. If you are reducing their hours and you do want to also reduce their pay concurrent with that, then we have to look at FTE as the way to set their, adjusting their FTE in order to ensure that their pay is reduced to a certain limit. The catch-22 is once you do reduce the limit, you may have some challenges in terms of the employee and employer contribution. and how much that impacts the individual workers' compensation, how that actually levels out in the end if they're still paying for full benefits. There are ways, in reference to the specific question about how you can create job change reasons and report off of those, there is some complexity to creating calculated fields that can be used in eligibility rules to identify if the start and return from reduced hours exist within the job change history for the worker. So you may actually look at the job change history. Where you can run into challenges is if your expectation is that workers are going to be coming and going on those reasons as well. If there's just one existence of start reduced hours in the worker's job change history, you can potentially retrieve that information and keep it active during that time. But it is a complex configuration that you're looking at doing. I'm just reading back through some of the other statements you have here as well, because you do want to keep them benefits eligible, provided hours remain as reduced.
I might not have worded that right. I had gone back and forth trying to explain this. So of course, on our benefits eligibility, it depends on the number of scheduled hours. We don't want to change it on the benefits eligibility rule, thereby making someone who really isn't eligible suddenly eligible for benefits. If we had someone who was like a half-time, you were mentioning FTE percent, because part of the goal with this would be to reduce their pay if they're an exempt employee. We don't use time and attendance in Workday, so that's not something that we would manage there for hourly employees. But we would still want to be able to report on what is our projected costs if we're reducing a full-time hourly person, even now they're 50%. So I've always seen FTE just a calculated percentage. Is there a place that we can reduce it?
No, I'm speaking in terms of updating scheduled weekly hours.
Okay.
Yeah,
which I think is what we use for the benefits eligibility rule.
And that is what yeah. So that's the challenge, because you do need to reduce the scheduled weekly hours in order to typically reduce their pay as well. So I think it might be easier to adjust, and I think I'd like to take this one away and give you some options, because I think it may be easier to adjust the calculation on the compensation than it is to change your benefits eligibility. Because I understand what you're saying.
Then if the goal is to change their comp.
Yeah, that's what I want to take away, because there's a couple different ways you can come at this, but ultimately the desire, when you have a mixed population of workers who are truly eligible based on your existing benefits eligibility structure, and then you have a population of workers that need a workaround because they technically are no longer eligible, that's where we have to look at doing any type of overhaul on the benefit side, of course, is going to be challenging, and we don't know how long that change has to be in place. So how much time and energy are you going to expend on a solution where you might only need it for a few months?
Yeah, and we may not even do this at all. We just want to be prepared should someone decide, yes, we're going down this road. So I don't want to overcomplicate it.
Yeah.
And we were discussing kind of the downstream impacts with benefits integration files and all of that stuff too. So
Right.
I just don't know if you might have known anything, if other people have raised a similar question, and what other options other people might have used.
Yes, and it's not an easy solution.
Yeah. But we're trying to be fair to the employees as well at the same time, with not too terribly impact them.
Right. And there are a couple ways you can do it. Let me take this one away so I can put it in writing for you and make it a little clearer, and then we'll share the answers to the questions after the session as well, and I'll get that out. You'll get a chance to see that as well.
Yeah, we had talked about a custom field, and then are we just getting too messy with it, that if we return somebody, do we have to make sure we remove that field if it look to that as now they're eligible? And so again, we didn't want to overcomplicate it.
Right.
We were talking about audit reports on a daily or weekly basis. Should a manager submit a job change and then accidentally remove or inadvertently remove the employee from being benefits eligible if we were looking to the last reason. So I appreciate any suggestions you might have for that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And I think, Paula, we've had a lot of appreciation of that question, and I think that's a great question that we can also, I think, to Anita's point, dig a little deeper and give you some opportunities. Next week, just so everyone knows, our Ask the Expert series is going to be based on benefits and reporting. So we will also make sure that we have, again, repeat attendees from the past 2 weeks, because we know that there's a lot of overlap, obviously, with core HR and benefits and payroll and absence and all of those components. So we'll make sure we have the right subject matter experts available next week as well.
Okay, I'm going to make sure I've enrolled for that one.
Excellent. So any other questions that out there? I know we've had a great, I think, cross section of things related to compensation, as well as time tracking, as well as benefits. Anything else out there anybody needs to ask? Well, with that, we're almost to time, and I appreciate everyone for joining us today. As I mentioned, we'll be having these weekly over the next month or so, so keep an eye out for additional information on our topics, but next week's topic is on benefits and reporting, so hopefully you'll be able to join us then. Thank you, everyone.